First, you must realize that you have no idea before you can know the idea. We scan across all the frequencies if we want to learn anything new. Let us begin.
What has physics done for me lately?
Furthermore, the equation E is equal mc squared.
We have now acquired a fateful power to alter and to destroy nature.
That's like when you're in physics and you go to Dreamworld saying, oh, this is a physics excursion.
Science. What is it all about?
The whole of human history all falls in the dust of one stroke of the nail file. You can't really get to grips with evolution unless you realise what an enormous amount of time.
Our own planet is only a tiny part of the vast cosmic tapestry, a starry fabric of worlds yet untold.
You're tuned in to what can only be described as the best radio station on this blue dot we call Earth. It is, of course, 4ZZZ, connecting and amplifying voices of our community, be it on your conventional wireless radio by tuning into the classic frequency of 102.1 FM, digital devices such as DAB or smart speaker, listening via the Community Radio Plus app, or streaming us live from our sensational website at 4ZZZ.org. And of course, you can always listen back to us or any 4ZZZ show for that matter using the ingenious on-demand feature also found at that URL. We also now have a weekly podcast of the show for your listening pleasure, curated by Toby, a condensed version of the show. Without the music, which my mum prefers, apparently. Just search for our show name, which is, of course, no idea. She gets a hard time. Spelt with a K, your weekly dose of science. And joining me today are two of my favourite gold standard science communicators. Good morning, Peta.
Good morning. Gold standard.
Yeah, you know it's a Trump, whatever.
Oh, I'd rather not be there.
No. They're trying to sell this gold science standard or something over in the States. And Gabe.
Hey, Gabe. Morning. Now, Max, I need to warn you both at the start. I've removed my weird science slot from this morning's show.
Right, okay.
It's not weird enough?
I've had to sacrifice it because the QS World Rankings have been updated.
And we've
which on this show is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I have gone through the rankings and pulled out all sorts of different stuff about what's happened.
Are you going to quiz us?
To the top unis, what's happened to the Australian unis. There is some quizzes happening throughout.
I didn't look at it.
That was the point.
Oh,
We're going to get into what happened to the Australian unis and the top three unis. There's been a change in the top three. Yeah.
Okay.
A little later on.
Cool.
What do you got, Peter?
I'm diving back into microbes, unfortunately, but it's interesting. And then I've got some really cool, not porpoise science.
Not porpoise science.
Oh, okay.
Max, what you got?
I got clandestine air bubbles. Work that one out.
To the non-clandestine air bubbles. All right, I'm back in the micro today. We've talked about how I'm not a micro person, but this is very interesting and kind of weird, hence the title. So we're going to be talking about bacteria and antibacterial. What do you guys know about antibacterial resistance?
It's 99%.
Yeah, otherwise known as antimicrobial resistance. Now it's got a new snappy name.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, in general, what do you...
Okay, it is antibacterial resistance or antimicrobial resistance would be a bacteria or microbe having resistance to some sort of antibiotic or antimicrobial property, like, if we use antibiotics poorly for an infection by not finishing a treatment or something like that, can have resistance, and that resistance can breed up, and then when you go back and try and hit it with the same thing again in your body or in someone else's body, it is immune to the antibiotics.
Yeah, so essentially antimicrobials are all sorts of medicines and things that we put on stuff. So that includes antibiotics, antivirals, antifungals, antiparasitics, medicines that we use to treat the humans, animals, plants, wherever, right? Essentially, it kills the microbes, but as Gabe is saying, if you don't finish the treatment or if you prescribe too much of it or things like this, you could have a couple of the microbes left over that then develop a resistance, are able to survive it, and then pass that on to their children and their children and their children, and then that new strain is resistant to the medicine.
And it's just an ongoing evolutionary arms race across the microbial world between viruses and bacteria and single-celled organisms and multi-celled organisms that are all the bacteria will constantly be trying to evolve ways of getting into a host if it's trying to do that or whatever, or growing on a host or taking food from a host, whatever it's trying to do. And the host will, if it's a negative interaction, will always be trying to evolve ways of stopping it.
Yeah, and it seems so... antimicrobial resistance is a big deal because it looks like the microbes are kind of winning. They're getting pretty good at resisting a lot of the drugs that we have to kill them. In human, not just in human medicines, also in plant medicines and animal medicines. So in all of our medicines, they're getting pretty resistant, which means that we're having a really hard time treating people. In one study, they found that for urinary tract infections all over the world caused by E. coli, 1 in 5 cases exhibited reduced susceptibility to the standard antibiotics. So this is becoming a huge problem in medicine. The what's it called? The Global Medical Group, World Health Organization, the WHO. Yeah. The WHO basically said that it's one of the top priorities for medicine in the coming decades of trying to figure out how to get around antimicrobial resistance. But it might be harder than we think, because last week, a team of microbiologists from the University of Georgia, QS ranking from 2025, please.
From 2025. That's good.
I like that
caveat. Yeah, 74.
I think they're quite high. I think it's like 28 or something.
It's 525. Georgia,
that American
the US
bias
state,
again.
not the country.
Yeah, I thought Uni Georgia was higher.
Yeah.
Mind.
Well, they uncovered some alarming evidence that antibiotic resistance to a last resort drug is hitching a ride into the US on imported seafood. Crazy. And unfortunately, it's just another finding to add to the growing concern about AMR getting through the food supply.
See what she's done here, Max?
Yeah, she's weaved it in.
Bloody
weaved it in.
Stuff into her weird science.
Yeah, it's
I do this every week. Every week I try and get it. I'll let you know when I don't.
Yeah.
So the drug specifically we're talking about is colostin, and it's a really old antibiotic. It was first introduced in the 1950s, and it was actually shelved in the US later because it has very toxic side effects, notably kidney and nerve damage. So not very nice. But it was brought back into medical use in recent decades as a last resort treatment because of things like antimicrobial resistance. The World Health Organization considers colostin a critically important antibiotic, but its power is waning because bacteria around the world are evolving resistance, and not just inherited resistance, but transmissible resistance. So let's talk into this. What is transmissible resistance? Until 2016, scientists believed that resistance to colostin was locked into bacterial DNA and had to be passed down through generations. So what we were talking about before. You pass on your resistance to your children. But then came the discovery of MCR genes, short for mobile colostin resistant genes, which are carried on plasmids. Now, plasmids are important because they're circular pieces of DNA that can jump between bacteria and between microbes, which means that resistance can spread much faster and much more broadly than once thought. You don't have to give it to your children, or do you call them children if you split through mitosis? I don't know. Anyway, through your seconds. So they're looking for these suckers everywhere, these plasmids, to figure out how and where it's spreading. And this lab first found a couple of these MCR genes in wastewater in the US state of Georgia, including the plasmid containing the genes. So they took a stab and thought that there must be a shared and mobile source of contamination to this wastewater, like food. So they went and collected shrimp and scallop samples from 8 different retail seafood markets in Atlanta, the capital city, and then they screened those samples for bacteria and tested for the presence of colostin resistance genes using molecular techniques like PCR and gene sequencing. Pretty common nowadays. And they detected several MCR genes, including plasmid-based ones, in the bacteria isolated from the imported seafood. Not only that, they found that these variants were the exact same ones they had previously found in the wastewater samples. So they found at least one major source of these plasmids. Importantly, they did not find MCR genes in the locally sourced seafood, which suggests that the contamination was tied to the international food supply chain. Now, why is this important? The US imports about 90% of its shrimp, we would call them prawns, much of it from countries with limited regulation on antibiotic use in aquaculture. So essentially, the prawns eat a bunch of antibiotics, develop resistance, then you eat it, and bam, you're resistant too. So not fantastic.
How does that work?
Because of these plasmids, because it doesn't have to be their children. It can go across cells.
Right.
Yeah, so they think it's just going to spread really quickly. And they found that bacterial strains identified were not typically screened in routine food safety inspections. So they're not looking for it currently. They might in the future, but they haven't been yet. And many of these countries continue to use colostin in agriculture. So they're using this specific drug in agriculture that we would only use in last resort cases. So they get resistance to it. So they think that these products can enter local food chains, ecosystems, and even clinical settings. This is a global crisis. They're really worried about where else this is going. And to my basic knowledge of where the US gets their prawns from, I think we may also get prawns from similar locations, so it's probably something Australian researchers would want to start looking into. But yeah, the ability of resistance genes like MCR to move between bacteria means that they can rapidly spread in hospitals, communities, and the environment. So they're wanting the US to, at the very least, start using these plasmids in their food safety tests to figure out whether they're there, to stop them from being imported, and get some stricter monitoring of that imported food. And they want global collaboration to track and control AMR. So yeah, it's pretty massive and a really scary way of these resistant genes moving around the globe very, very quickly.
Wake up! Time to die.
Is it though? Is that because of my story?
No.
That'd be so depressing.
Now, apparently this study was inspired by naturally occurring air bubbles in glaciers. And for reasons...
Yes, this is... Well, these are a thing because they get trapped, Max. They get trapped from thousands of years ago. So
Yes.
you can date...
Yeah.
You can date some of the stuff in the ice, then you can date the air, and you get a perfect little capsule of air from wherever that was.
Cool. Well, this research doesn't go that direction. The researchers are from Beijing Institute of Technology, or BIT, QS ranking.
Institute of Technology, so you got to knock it down a few. I'm going to go 150.
I think it's high. I think it's like going to be like 1,000.
I think.
259.
Damn it. I was closer though.
They've developed a method to encode messages in ice. Published in...
It's like a message in a bottle.
Published in...
Developed a message.
Yes.
So is everyone.
You can't just
called the freezer.
Why don't you just carve it in the ice? Just carve words in the ice. I feel like that's more
Carve words in
efficient.
the ice. Freeze a handwritten note in the ice.
Yeah.
Many ways of encoding messages in the ice.
Seems easier.
Like
Is
the
news
yellow
that
ice.
They've just done that, or they've found a new way of doing it.
If you want to check out their paper, it's in the journal Cell Reports Physical Science. And it explains how the team encoded frozen messages in binary and Morse code by manipulating the size and distribution of bubbles in ice. They say...
That is so... No. Who's reading things? There's no point of making messages if no one's going to read them. It's so much easier to just write words.
I know.
Or just, if it's enter binary, just scratch binary. Why are we making it in bubbles?
They say it could be used for short messages in very cold climates.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I'm sure it could be.
Conventional information storage can be difficult and expensive. But call me crazy, I'm thinking a pen and paper is pretty good.
I think it might be cheaper to just scratch it into the ice. Don't quote me on it, but I feel like it could be.
A bit of background. As water freezes, dissolved gases are squeezed and pushed together, forming trapped pockets of air, that is bubbles. These bubbles are either egg-shaped or needle-shaped and can usually be found within...
Oh, I see how they're doing the Morse code.
Yeah, with three-dimensional chunks of ice. To investigate how these air bubbles form in ice, the team used a cold plate to freeze a thin layer of water between two transparent sheets of plastic. Then they tested different temperatures and orientations to examine the impact of freezing rate and direction of bubble formation. They found that suddenly increasing the freezing rate by sharply decreasing the cold plate temperature resulted in a single bubble layer. Faster freezing rates resulted in egg-shaped bubbles. So by gradually reducing the freezing rate, they were able to produce consecutive layers containing differently shaped bubbles. The first layer contained only egg-shaped bubbles, followed by the layer with egg and needle-shaped bubbles, followed by a layer of needle-shaped bubbles, and finally a bubbleless layer of clear ice. Next, this gets really involved. Next, the researchers tested whether they could use this information to encode messages in ice. To do this, they assigned bubble sizes, shapes, and positions to distinct characters within Morse and binary codes. Then they programmed their cold plate to control the rate of and direction of freezing, resulting in a slice of ice with appropriately positioned and sized air bubbles. To read the frozen message, this is the kicker, right? The team took a photo of the ice and converted it to grayscale. Then they trained a computer to automatically detect the position and size of air bubbles based on their grayscale.
Just right.
Based on these grayscale values, the computer decoded the frozen message into binary or Morse code and then converted the message into readable format.
Okay, let me tell you what I'm thinking. A, in 100 years, like, there's no long-term storage of this data because ice will melt. So,
Yes.
like, we're moving into a warmer planet. Why are we trying to store things in ice? B, even if we do manage to store things in ice and cool down the planet, in 300 years, this is going to be only a mass conspiracy theory with one absolute nutter who's walked into the ice and gone, guys, get a load of these bubbles. Don't they look weird to you? And
Let's take a photograph.
Like, no, man, like, they're just bubbles. How did you even see that? Like, it's bubbles. I'm sure it's fine. And they're like, no, I swear, there's a message in the bubbles. And everyone's going to be like, shut up, Greg. Like, move on.
That's right.
You have to get back with your wife. This is sad. You need to stop obsessing over the bubbles, man. Like, I cannot see a future where this is a normal and acceptable way of sending messages.
In the future, the team plans to investigate the impact of gas type and concentration on bubble ice characteristics and to further examine
let's really nail down the
bubble
methodology.
in three-dimensional context. I know. Wasn't that weird science? Like, they got money to do this?
Weird science is useless science.
I love it.
Knock them down a few pegs in the QS rankings. This is terrible.
What do the next 50 years of 4ZZZ sound like? We have no idea.
Yeah.
You tune into 4ZZZ. The show is No Idea, your weekly dose of science. With me, Max. We got Peter and we got Gabe. What do you got for us?
QS rankings, Max. It's happened.
QS rankings.
2026 rankings are out. These are the rankings we talk about pretty much every time we do a story or mention a uni or research institute.
I think we're their biggest marketer.
I think we're one of the biggest fans. That's for sure.
Fan's a strong word.
And they've released new results, which means all the rankings have changed, or at least some of them have. So I want to get straight in. I'll get into how it works and where the Aussie ones have come out. But first, let's just get the top three out. Mm-hmm. Take a guess.
Okay, used to be ANU at the top, but I don't think
Not
it
for
is
Australia.
anymore.
No.
For the world.
For the world.
Oxford, Cambridge,
MIT.
Second, Max?
Yeah. So I'd say MIT was number one, wasn't it, for a while? And then Cambridge was two, and then
Oxford was 3 or 4.
Well, yeah. So what's the new?
Number one is MIT.
Okay.
Same as last year.
Maintained. Good for them.
Yeah.
Number 2, Imperial College London.
Ah, yeah.
I remember they were pretty close.
They were like 8
No
or something
change
before.
in 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
No change in 1 and 2. Number 3 is where we receive our first change.
Yeah.
Stanford University is now the third highest ranked research institution on the QS
Americans.
The Americans, yeah. So they've jumped from 6th. They've hopped over some names that are pretty impressive. Cambridge, Harvard, and Oxford.
They've got a real knowledge gap in their population, don't they?
Jumped over into 3rd spot. So let me get into the methods of how this works so you can get an idea of why they've moved. There's 1,501 institutions were measured in this year's rankings. That's
so we're not
down
going to get a
from-
1,500 plus this year, are we?
Well, it's only down from 1,503, so they don't go that high. Or if they do, they just have it like if they're not registered, they just get a 1,500 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So 112 of those are new this year, which means there was a bunch that also dropped off. And there was some new ones, a new one in Australia too that we'll get into that did pretty well. There are now 106 countries appearing in the rankings. Now the methodology is intense, highly scrutinized as well.
I'd imagine
but
since
also
every single university.
It is very intense. Millions of academic papers and surveys of academics and employers. They look at student outcomes, sustainability, all sorts of metrics. There's a massive list of the stuff they go through that go into these rankings, and their rankings are different to other, similar but different to other rankings, like the Time Higher Ed ranking. So the different way you measure this is going to have a massively different result, but this is what they have their way. It uses all sorts of stuff. The sustainability and things like that have been added in recently and have been gradually impacting results more and more. Stanford in particular moved up from 6th to 3rd through improvements in their sustainability and number of international faculty. Those are the key scores that they improved on to jump up to 3rd. And sustainability is environmental, but also other stuff like social sustainability and cultural sustainability. It's a broad term. This year, of those 1,501, 478 institutions went up, 573 went down. The rest, you guessed it, stayed the same. Does anyone know which university? Do you want to have a stab at which country the university that had the biggest gain was from?
China.
So the biggest jump.
China.
From Max?
China.
Malaysia.
Oh, really?
Sunway University in Malaysia jumped 129 spots from 539th to 410th.
Wow, good for Malaysia.
Very cool. Last year, Australia's universities were actually one of the headline performers out of the rankings because we did so well. There were 9 in the top 100 and they most, if not all, made gains. I think most of them made gains. This year, there's a different country, or 2 countries, I guess, that have made the honours list for really big improvements. Do you want to have a crack at those 2?
China.
France.
You're not too far off with China, Max. It's India and Hong Kong.
Oh, I just said India. Damn
Both
it.
of those had more go up than went down of all of their ones that appeared in the listings. China and Germany, Max, did see big improvements in some institutions, but had drops in others.
Right.
So it was a bit of a split.
It balanced out, yeah.
Yeah. So, overall, the country had a mixed performance, but there were some Chinese institutions that did quite well. Now, let's cut to Australia. The bad news. 69%, 25 of our 36 institutions on the rankings have dropped.
Oh, wow.
One of the worst performances of any country. So the only 2 countries that had a higher percentage of their institutions drop were Austria and Russia.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, and they've got good reasons.
And that includes our top-ranked university, Melbourne University, which recently we were just talking about going up to 13th. It's now back down to 19th.
19th?
Which is where it's been sitting for a while previously, for a couple of years. But they had a really good performance last year in 13th, dropped to 19th. They've been replaced by the University of Chicago, who actually went from 21st to 13th, although that is, again, kind of reflective of where they've been. Last year seems to have rocked some of the rankings a bit. This year maybe is a bit of a settling back. And some of those other trends like India and China doing well coming through like we expected. Now, we still have 9 in the top 100. So keep that performance from last year.
That's good.
Means we are still one of the top performing countries in the world for university rankings.
Hell yeah.
We're still 5th if you rank it as proportion of our institutions in the top 100.
Cool.
Yep.
Is that per capita as well?
No, just proportion of
I'd
all
be
of
interested
them.
in of all of them, the percentage, and then like comparing against other countries per capita. 'Cause I think that's
Singapore and
interesting.
Malaysia might beat us on those sorts of things.
Singapore might definitely be. You're right.
And we had another noteworthy bit of news out of the rankings that was about Australia, and that's Adelaide University. You know about Adelaide University?
I mean, I know of it.
I think you know of the University of Adelaide.
Oh, no, you're right. I do. You're correct.
Adelaide
I don't know
University.
about Adelaide University.
It's debuting on the QS rankings this year because the University of Adelaide, which was previously ranked 82nd, and the University of South Australia, which was previously ranked 340th, have merged and become the Adelaide University, which has debuted at 86th.
Right.
Now, considering they've merged 2 universities, one which was probably it is still just, I think, functionally the University of Adelaide with some the South
another
Australia
campus
one.
or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And some new staff. To be able to go through that, maintain an 86th.
Even just the admin.
While, it's gone from 82nd to 86th if you take the highest one from Uni of Adelaide. But to go through the merge and also just the fact that most of the Aussie unis have dropped, that's a pretty solid performance.
It's a pretty solid performance.
Now, let's get into Australia's, those top 9. Yep,
Right.
which includes
We
the
know
University
Uni
of
Melbourne's
Queensland.
the top.
So we're going to start at 9th. It's the University of Technology, Sydney. Last year, it was ranked 88th. It slipped as 96th.
Right.
In 8th, it's Adelaide Uni, debuting at 82nd, which does replace the University of Adelaide in that 8th slot in the rankings for Australian universities. 7th best in Australia, the University of Western Australia, was 77th, stays 77th.
Good for you,
Good job,
WA.
UWA. Now, number 6th is the University of Queensland.
Oh, are you
Last year
kidding?
It was ranked 40th.
Yeah.
This year, well, that's where it was last year too.
Yeah, okay.
But this year, any guesses?
50.
40.
42.
Oh,
Small drop.
Okay.
But is back where it has been for most of the 2020s. So it's not horrible. Now, next comes Monash. They were at 37th last year. They're at 36th this year in the world, 5th in Australia. ANU is then 4th.
ANU's 4th?
They were 30th. They are now 32nd.
Wow.
The top 3, University of Melbourne's at the top.
USyd and UNSW.
The other 2 are UNSW.
Although
and
I saw there was an upset because last year UNSW and USyd shared.
Yeah, they
position. I
tied,
believe it was
didn't they?
19th or something, wasn't it?
I think that was the year before, and last year University of Sydney got 18th,
Right.
and the University of New South Wales got 19th, and they have now
Swapped.
switched in the sense
Yeah.
that the University of New South Wales went from 19th to 20th, and USyd went from 18th to 25th. So they
Really?
actually slid back
Whoa.
quite a way,
Yeah.
and are now 3rd in the country. UNSW is 2nd, and University of Melbourne maintains their 1st in Australia ranking. but they do drop from 13th to 19th overall. So we have 19th, 20th, 25th, 32nd, 36th, 42nd, 77th, 82, 96th in the world in our top 9 for Australia.
Yeah.
The other ones that feature on the list, if you're interested, that come after that are RMIT, Macquarie Uni, Curtin, University of Wollongong, Deakin, and QUT is in there as 15th top in the country. They rank 226th this year overall globally. Now, I wanted just to very briefly, Max, do a small look into why our unis have dropped so much. So the CEO of QS, which is
what a job.
It's called Quacquarelli Simmons. It's just the name of the group.
How long have we been doing this and I've never known that?
Quacquarelli Simmons. I think it's actually Simmons, Quacquarelli Simmons.
Yeah.
So the CEO, Jessica Turner, said there were areas of concern, is what she's quoted as saying, for Australia's higher ed system. She looked at a dip in reputation as well as the political situation around international students as potential reasons, but also looked at underfunding, restructuring, redundancies, international those headlines of international education. So I think it was a mix of factors. I had a quick look, Max, at the numbers for UQ, given that that's the one that we talk about the most on 4ZZZ. Overall, its ranking this year, if they just give it a point score at the end of the day, between 0 and 100, and it got 85.1. Last year, it was 80, I think? 80.2 last year. So it's actually done quite well in the point scoring. It's just one of these things that you're not just competing against a number, you're also competing against everyone else. So if a bunch of other people just do better than you do, even if you improve, you still slide down the rankings.
If we got 85, does that mean that MIT got 100?
I'm not sure what MIT got. I can have a look.
Yeah, I wonder because
I think they got...
that seems like that's pretty close.
Yeah.
For 42nd to have 85 out of 100 seems like that's not that big of a gap.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I will have a look and bring it back to you. But
wonderful.
Some of the points that UQ performed well on were things like sustainability and made improvements in areas where they haven't done as well in the past, like faculty-student ratio and employment outcomes are some of the areas where they score a bit lower on the scale. They're still lower relative to where they perform well, but they have boosted that thing. The thing that I noted that they went down a few points on were the academic reputation and the citations per faculty, which are some of the ones that cop a lot of flack in the rankings. Citations per faculty is how many... Citation is if your research gets cited in someone else's research effectively. So those point scorings around that are a huge thing for individual researchers, for schools, for faculties, for universities, for world rankings. People kind of hate it because it just becomes a numbers game of how many citations can you get, how many papers can you publish, which then just...
And if you're in a niche field, it's hard, you know?
It pushes people into different science that they wouldn't otherwise have considered, and maybe, it's a very simple metric, and simple metrics often mean you get some callous outcomes in how science gets done. So it's slipped in those rankings, citations per faculty and academic reputation. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays into the Australian universities going forward, because there's also a big push within a lot of academics and within a lot of the scientific community to try and steer away from those metrics as being things that you have to put so much emphasis on. But it is still, to this day, these universities know it is massive for their funding, for their rankings, for everything, that they perform well in these metrics. And so there are meetings in universities where they sit there and go, we need to divert this many millions of dollars into this faculty to improve its citation count by this much. That's like, and that determines what science gets done for the year.
We've talked about how long things like this push for shorter term studies, like get as many studies as you can done in the year so you get more citations, right? But that means that you can't do things like long-term monitoring, like the sort of like really in-depth studies where we go, wow, they had a sample size of over 1,000 and they've been studying this population for 10 years. Like that sort of stuff is hard to come by nowadays because of things like citation count and paper count and trying to figure out stuff. So yeah, I think it is interesting to see that that's been such a pusher of the numbers, because I hope that the admin at UQ don't take that too harsh.
Oh, they absolutely will.
They absolutely will, but I hope they don't.
Because it determines their rankings for next year. But to be fair to QS, they are talking a lot more about emphasis on things like qualitative metrics and sustainability metrics and those sorts of things. So I think we will see, like seeing Stanford go from 6th to 3rd?
Yep.
So that's, we're already seeing that having an impact, those changes. That's where I'll leave it, Max.
Beautiful.
The QS rankings updated. We've slipped. But I don't know if it necessarily means the universities are performing worse than they were last year. It may just be that the competitors are performing a bit better.
And we're getting some texts on the text
QS
line.
rankings.
Yeah, about QS ranking.
It's a hot topic.
Yeah.
Now, let's start with 102.1 FM. That was the question we got asked. So rank 102 is Pohang University of Science and Technology, which is in South Korea.
Yeah,
Now
our
we
patron university for next year.
Yeah, that is could be our sister university.
Our sister university.
We won't tell them, but it will be.
Imagine we find someone who's listening who goes to Bogong. We're like, I'm patron saint.
What else was I looking at? So MIT, you asked about Peta. It does have a perfect 100 out of 100 score.
Good for them.
Griffith, we got asked about, was ranked 200. Sorry, I've just lost it. It's 230 something, wasn't it?
Yeah, or 42 or something. Yeah,
268. Actually.
We're good, aren't we? And of course, the classic number 69.
Yes, which
I think it's Brown University. I think
it's Brown.
Yeah.
Brown.
So-
Well, that's convenient.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear more radio like this, it's always good to subscribe. Is that the segue we're going to use?
Or John. Yes, it is.
More gripping
It
radio.
is Brown University at 69.
Yeah.
Good for us.
I looked it up
Good
last
for
night. I thought I got to
us.
do that for Izzy. It's a job done. Anyway, if you want to subscribe, you can go onto our website at 4zzz.org.au/support. If you're under 18, it's $25. If you're a pet, $25. Concession is $40. A full is $80. A passionate is $140. Or if you want to be a super sub, it's $500. You get your name written downstairs. You can also You can also ring Stephen downstairs, who will take your order on 07 3252 1555. Gabe, anything else to add?
Beautiful. That's it. Got a monthly sub prize, don't we?
We do. I think it's $200.
What is it this week? This month?
It's Garage Sounds Record Store, $200 gift certificate. Garage Sounds is a new record store in Brisbane who are a proud 4ZZZ subscriber discount outlet. Garage Sounds has donated a $200 gift certificate to subscribe during the month of June to be entered into the draw. Garage Sounds stocks thousands of vinyl records, CDs, cassette tapes, DVDs, books and magazines, as well as buying and trading all things music, including paying cash for entire collections. 4ZZZ subscribers I'll just finish this off. Get a 10% discount off all stock in store and at any fair or market we attend, including the monthly Brisbane Record Fair. Check out Garage Sound's Facebook page or call or text Riff Randall on 0419 773 848. Job done.
Sorry, Max, I should know not to interrupt you when you're reading. You're like a freight train. My point was just, if you're at a university and you want to improve your culture score so that next year's QS rankings you hop up a little bit, I would recommend subscribing to 4ZZZ. It's a great way to get a woman aglow and increase your culture.
That's the June prize for Garage Sounds, and then if you subscribe in the next few days, you'll go into the running to win that, and then there'll be another one next month.
Okay, it's time for the best part of the show. Loosely defined as science, yeah, you already know. Everybody listens to 4ZZZ just to hear us talking about what Butters just did. Subscriptions just keep rolling like the tires on a car. But something tells me that our science curves won't go far. But unlike an engine, I won't keep you in suspension. We're all here to hear him talk, so let's give him attention. You're not ready for when he starts rapping. Gonna hand the mic to Max, and I'm not talking Van Stappen.
You hear how Jay talks about Bottas and how Bottas hasn't... He's just third driver, isn't he, at the moment for Mercedes? But there is talk that he might be going to the Cadillac team, Gabe. Have you seen some of that?
Yes, the new American team for next year.
Yeah. So that should be interesting. Let's talk F1. Sadly, no F1 race last weekend, but there have been a few showings of the new Apple blockbuster movie called F1. And with 82 reviews counted, Rotten Tomatoes rates it at an impressive 88%. Meanwhile, Metacritic gives it a score of 70 out of 100. Your thoughts, Gabe, on this?
On the movie, my thoughts are, Max, that the Lilo and Stitch movie also had a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes score from the critics, and hate that movie. Loathe the remake with a passion that I have not experienced for a movie in a long time.
Really?
Max. So I will hold out judgment until I see this thing. I did see one interview with Carlos Sainz, Ferrari, ex-Ferrari driver now, Williams driver, who said it was entertaining, but not really for the rev heads.
Right.
So I think there's some of the classic movie magic going on where if you just dig in a little harder, your car that's way slower, faster than the big guns.
Into the tropes of movie making. Fair enough.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Why not? Brad Pitt's in it, so
Hopefully we'll see it in the next couple of weeks and we'll give a full report. MotoGP also happened on the weekend. It was in Italy. It was another Ducati lockup. Or lockout, I should have said. First 4 riders were all riding Ducatis. Aussie Jack Miller, where do you reckon he finished? Was it a Miller special? He commented, he said his bike was basically unrideable after clutch, aero, fuel issues forced him to retire from 15th. Anyway.
It's a pity. Hey, the bike was performing better early in the season, was it not?
It was, I think so,
he wasn't having these issues until recently.
Yeah. Oh, well, the Yamaha, what do you do? Anyway, maybe you have to swap back to Ducati. The MotoGP also has a new owner. Did you read about this? Liberty Media, who also controls F1, now controls MotoGP. So they've got the big two. They've got the cars and the bikes. And I was hoping that now that Liberty Media's taken over and a bit of Netflix, there would be a MotoGP ride to survive. See what I did there?
I mean, they have to, right?
Yeah.
Surely that's coming.
That title's been taken already, would you believe, by another Netflix show, Ride to Survive. And this is what the blurb says. It focuses on what they describe as the high-octane world of horse racing.
Oh, they've given it to the horse people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to hear text.
What about MotoGP, the Miller Special? Supercars were in Darwin on the weekend. The Triple Crown event featured races 17 and 18 on the Saturday and race 18 on Sunday. Red Bull's Brock Feeney just won all 3, so nothing more to talk about there. And then NASCAR, it was another cup race for former supercar champion Shane Van Gisbergen. This time the drivers were back racing on ovals. So not much to report. Shane finished 31st out of the 33 drivers that managed to finish the race. But looking ahead, there'll be another oval race this weekend. But the weekend after that, they go to the streets of Chicago. And we all know SVG's pretty good at the streets of Chicago because he famously won on debut in NASCAR Cup. And better still, get this, he will be joined by Aussie supercar champion Will Brown. He's the reigning world champion, Australian champion at the moment, who has already flown out of Darwin to prepare. So it'll be pretty cool seeing Will and Shane battling it out on the streets of Chicago, which I'm calling supercar style sailing.
That's pretty good.
Ferrari apparently will announce today how exactly they will be involved in competitive sailing. They announced in January last year that the sport of sailing was a great fit with their company's mission for innovation, performance and sustainability. And finally, let's talk about F1, just rounding it all out. It's the Austrian GP this weekend. It will be a traditional race weekend format, which means, well, this is what I'm thinking anyway, we'll see Lando Norris in his McLaren top the spreadsheets in FP2 and FP3, then qualify down the order. Then he'll do some interesting overtakes, but ultimately will crash out. Too soon?
Well, okay, good. Job done. Don't need to watch the race then.
The race starts at 11 p.m.
And if you're not going to watch it because you already know what happens, thanks to Max's prediction, 10 p.m. is when the MotoGP starts on a Sunday evening. Hopefully they can get through their 26 laps in about an hour or so, and you can flick over to the Formula 1 at 11.
And we'll save the F1 Academy for when Izzy's back next week.
Cool.
Any more to add for the MotoRap this week?
Job done. We'll get into some marine science, and if we have time, we're going to squeeze in some moth astrology.
Yeah, before that, we heard from Pete, who loves his MotoGP, and he said the MotoGP doco should be the glorious history of Doohan, Gardner and Stoner, and some European blokes who were all right too. Okay.
Glad to hear that you do have a friend called Peta from the marine degree at JCU from 1993.
What I'm hearing from this, Max, is we didn't get the original Friendly Neighbourhood marine scientist called Peter.
So
we got ripped off with
the set out. That's right. You're tuning into
Stitch up, man. Come on.
And the show is No Idea, your weekly marine scientist show. What do you got for us, Peter?
That's it. All right. Who likes exfoliating?
Oh.
Well,
all the time.
Yeah.
Doing it right now.
That's right. Everyone loves exfoliating.
Oh, this is not about the whales, is it?
Well, no, it isn't, Max, because they're not whales. So
they're true. You got me there. Damn.
Yeah. Got him. Got him with zoology yet again. Oh, damn, taxonomy. Taxonomy comes for everyone. All right, does anyone have any examples of exfoliating in the animal kingdom?
Bears on big trees?
Bears on big trees is probably the big one everyone thinks of. Where they're like rubbing their back on the tree and they're like, yeah.
Fish will scrape themselves against rocks and corals?
And corals. I think, to me, the most famous one in the marine world is little cleaner fish who will literally eat stuff you don't want. That is exfoliation, even if someone else is doing it. But using a tool is pretty slick in the ocean. Tool use and construction has been pretty well documented on land, but it's pretty rare in marine species, at least partially because it's hard to observe them. So rare to us, but maybe not rare overall. But it seems pretty fitting that orcas would be the first to show us tool making for grooming in a
taking a break from sinking some ships, they've gone for a scratch.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'm going to take that rudder out. Yeah, that's right.
Orcas can do both. After you've sunk a ship, you probably want a good scratch. This is a groundbreaking discovery. Researchers from the University of Exeter, QS ranking 2025, for me, please.
Is that in UK, is it?
35.
It is.
52.
It's 169.
Cool.
And they have observed southern resident killer whales, or orcas, engaging in a unique behaviour, using kelp as a tool to groom each other. So how do they find this out? These particular orcas are actually super well researched, like bordering on famous. The group is known as the southern resident killer whales. That's just the name of the group. And they live in the Salish Sea off of the western coast of the Canadian-US border. So like between Alaska and Canada, I think, around that sort of area. And you may have even seen them before because they're in the opening scene of Free Willy. That's this group of orcas. There you go, if you know them. There are 3 distinct pods in the group, and they're pretty well documented. Researchers have been observing these guys for over 50 years.
Which one did the jump?
Yes.
I'm sure
I love how long that joke took to load.
Very depressed captive orca that was used to make that shot possible.
3 sentences between me saying Free Willy and you getting that joke out there, just so we know. That's the timing on, I wonder which one did the jump. Good processing speed. Right, so they've been looked at for almost 50 years, and now they fly drones over them most days of the year. So they are very well watched.
Yes.
They are watched. I will say using drone footage is a really good idea because if you fly at a certain height above them, which they do, you actually can't hear it underwater. So it has no impact on their behaviour. It is a super great way of researching.
Well, we think it does.
Mammals.
Maybe they see it and go, what should we do today? Someone grab some kelp. They'll love it.
It's so strange. This thing's been following us for ages. But despite all of this watching, this is the first time the tool-making behaviour has been recorded. So the research team utilised some of the high-quality drone footage to study them. And as we mentioned, that we think shows natural behaviours without disturbance. So over multiple sessions, the drones captured clear images of orcas interacting with bull kelp. So bull kelp's quite big. To give you a description of what it sort of looks like, imagine a big wavy leaf and then it's got a stem, and then at the bottom it's got like a big almost claw-looking thing which is called a holdfast, which locks onto the rock. So claw-looking thing that locks onto the rock, like almost like a root ball. It's very, very strong. Then it's got a little spindly bit of stem, a bit more stem, and then a big leaf-looking thing. That's sort of what it looks like. And so that's the bull kelp, and they found that these orcas were interacting with it. And they posted the videos too, and they're fascinating. It's a full video. I watched the whole thing, and I had to watch it twice to actually see the kelp because I couldn't.
Really? Okay, yeah.
It's really hard, but once you see it, it is really sick. So at first what they do is they make the tool, and they do this by using their teeth to grab that little bit of stalk of kelp right next to the holdfast, the grippy bit, and then they break off this piece. Now, when I first read it, I thought they meant that they were using the holdfast, which is really tough.
Tough bit
as the scratching bit, because to me that made sense.
Effectively like a root system.
Yeah, except it's very like calcified.
But it's just built to hold.
It's almost like rock-like in its feeling. Like it's very, very tough. And so I thought, in my mind, I was like, oh, like that's a great idea to use that for scratching. That is not what they use. They actually tear off the bit of stem right above it, which is still quite tough, but not. I imagine if you scratch yourself with a holdfast, you'd bleed even then. So yeah, bit of the stem just above. And once they have this, they approach a social partner, flip the like leafy bit over onto their bodies, and then press their head and the kelp stem bit between them and their partner. And then once they've got the bit of the rough bit of stem between them, pressed between them, they swim in this like amazing formation. They never lose contact between their bodies. They're pressed into each other because otherwise it would drop. And they sort of like, one will move up while the other is a bit slower, and then the other one will move up while the other one's a bit slower.
So they're both getting exfoliated.
They're both getting exfoliated
it's not one
at the same
holding
time.
in its mouth and scratching.
No, they both get it because it's sort of rubbed between like just their flanks, like the sides of their bodies, and they'll just rub it. And then some of them will go upside down, so they get more spots on their bodies, but they're constantly pressing against each other the entire time, which is really cool to see. This behaviour, they have termed it Allokelpering, allo meaning friends, kelp being kelp. It was consistent. Kelp is kelp.
Kelp friending.
Yeah, kelp friending, basically. And it's consistent across the various individuals and the 3 pods, which suggests this isn't something they've just picked up. This has been around for a while. It's a pretty widespread practice amongst the population. So then the next question is obviously, why would you do this? And the first, like, obvious thing is, well, everything exfoliates. It's a huge part of being an animal. Like skin maintenance is a big thing. Everyone loves exfoliation, but they also think it's social bonding. It's social bonding mixed with grooming and skin maintenance. So that's a nice thing to do. And while orcas across social groups, ages and genders were seen doing this, so the pairs, they were more likely to groom close relatives or those of similar age. So they had a couple in the videos. There was like a mother and a daughter, a grandmother and her grandson, and then like 2 brothers. So the relatives were more likely to do it. And they also found some evidence that orcas with skin conditions were more likely to do the grooming, which makes sense when you think about it because they've probably got itchy skin, and the only way to fix that, they don't have like opposable thumbs, they can't scratch it otherwise, so get a bit of kelp. But interesting, I didn't even realize they could have complex skin conditions. But very interesting for that. And then they think that these behaviors indicate a level of cognitive complexity and cultural transmission, previously unrecognized in marine mammals. I will say orcas have been known to be incredibly clever for a very long time. They're, as we've mentioned before, one of the only other animals that experience menopause, which shows that female and social bonds are incredibly important, that like transmission of knowledge between individuals.
Because it means implies there's an evolutionary reason for the females to be alive beyond breeding age, reproductive age.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means they're adding some sort of value to continuing their genetic information beyond actually just having offspring.
Yeah, exactly. So menopause, it really shows the intelligence and like community level of a species. Now onto the sad news, because I'm me and there's always sad news. Unfortunately, the southern resident killer whales are a critically endangered population with fewer than 80 individuals remaining. So keep in mind, these have been watched for 50 years. They're really popular. Like, it's not like people don't know about these orcas. They're really popular orcas, but they're still critically endangered. One of the main reasons for this is because their primary food source is Chinook salmon, and they are facing extreme conservation challenges through fishing, aquaculture, a bunch of different things. Very upsetting. Hopefully, they think that, you know, just by continuing to watch these orcas, they can help boost their profile a little bit and get salmon preserved. But yeah, they've been watched for a long time. But it is sort of interesting that, like, it puts forward this other idea of not just, like, obviously if this population went extinct, orcas aren't going to go extinct. But what will go extinct is their cultural practices, because they have culture in these smaller groups. Like, you would lose Allokelpering. No other orca group does this, that we know of at least. All of the culture of this population would just die off. So it's important, it shows the importance of populations, especially in social creatures like orcas. So you have to maintain local populations. Yeah,
you once you lose some stuff, you can't get it back. I mean, they are closer to a dolphin than they are a whale. Well, they are a dolphin.
They're the biggest dolphin.
But there's the southern right whales off the coast of Australia. There's a western population that has rebounded a bit from historic whaling, and then there's an eastern group that hasn't rebounded. And one of the reasons they think it hasn't rebounded is because we just killed all of the whales that had most of the breeding sites in their cultural memory. So when they bring their young back, and the young would remember those breeding sites. There's only one known breeding site left that's on the eastern half of the country, and so it only produces a couple calves. They haven't seen them go back to any of their old areas, so it just becomes this huge issue. And you've got a very social, cultural species. If you lose that, it's very hard to get that back.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting. It's a really beautiful behavior. The videos are sick. I totally recommend looking up Allokelpering and YouTube and watching them do it. See if you can spot the kelp. It's very difficult.
I couldn't spot it. I just looked at it then.
But you can see it like wrapped around there.
Okay.
It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, very
Sometimes you can
difficult.
see the like leafy bit wrapped around their dorsal fin.
Right,
So you can see a
okay.
little bit that they're tailing on them.
I'll go back and have another look.
Crazy behavior. Typical orcas.
I thought they just
Take a
swimming
closer
together. Yeah, that's right. What do you got for us, Gabe?
I've got for you, Max, moths that navigate using the stars. Pretty bloody cool. We have been told a lie, or at least we've believed a lie because we've been told insects don't use stars to navigate. We've told invertebrates don't use stars to navigate. We
I don't know
birds
if I have been
can.
told this personally.
No insect has ever been known to use stars to navigate. When we talk
Well, that's
insect
good.
migration, we talk about magnetic fields, we talk about sight, we talk about things that we know they use. We don't talk about stars.
Are you going to
Now,
say
and
they
this
set up
is-
a cabinet and put some LED lights in and stuff like that? Tell me that's true.
It's pretty similar. It's pretty similar. So this Australian moth has proved this idea wrong, right? So let's get into Bogong Moths. Do you know about them, Max?
Yes.
They're pretty famous. They do this massive migration.
They're pretty big.
They are. They're large
And
moths.
hardy, yeah.
And each spring, so billions of them would emerge from breeding grounds across Southeast Australia, up from Queensland, New South Wales, and they'd fly, and Victoria. And they would fly into caves and crannies and things in the Australian Alps. That's what they're going. So they're going to avoid the heat that would otherwise be probably pretty deadly for them and hit the Alps, caves and nooks and crannies
Right,
and things.
okay.
Yeah, and they rest there, not for food or mates. They rest there, and then eventually in autumn they make the return journey to breed, die, then they repeat the thing
Really?
again. Right, so they go to these breeding feeding grounds, they fly to the Alps, and they fly back.
Chill out.
And they're using the Southern
survive.
Cross, are they, to fly there? Or?
And then, well, Max,
No,
this
they're
is what
not.
this is what they wanted to find out. Now, there are 3 unis that were involved in this. I'm going to read out all 3 because one was Lund Uni.
Oh,
US
don't
ranking?
know. 402.
Yeah, I'll say that too.
72.
Damn.
ANU was also involved. Australian National University.
Yeah, it's
US 2026 ranking.
It's 30. There you go.
32. It was 30.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned all 3 because the third one was the University of South Australia, which might be the last time we mention the University
Yeah.
of South Australia.
82.
It's now part of Adelaide
Well, no,
University.
the University of South Australia was 126.
It was
Yeah.
340.
Much more than
And
126.
it's now,
That's right, Max.
Adelaide University is now 86th. So this was published in Nature. This is how big of a deal this is to
Yeah, okay.
biologists
Yeah, yeah.
around the
Nature.
world.
Yeah.
Biggest journal in the world.
Your favourite
and
journal.
they used, Max, sophisticated flight simulators and brain recordings of these
How
moths.
Oh,
do you
come
measure
on.
the brains of that
environment.
moth?
So I'm going to quote the researcher in the article he wrote up, or one of the researchers in the article he wrote up in the conversation. First, we light trap Bogong moths that were either migrating towards the Alps in spring or away again in autumn. We next placed them in a special flight arena inside the lab. Flight arena. And finally controlled Earth's magnetic fields with magnetic coils around the arena and the starry night sky by projecting a highly realistic starry night sky
Cool.
to
Yeah.
the roof of the
That's
arena.
Can I tell you what I'm imagining?
Yeah.
I'm imagining like a mini version, not that mini, like maybe the size of like a pool table, but a mini version of the Colosseum with the starry night sky on top and all these lights around it and like magnets.
Yeah.
And these Bogong moths just wake up in the Colosseum in the flight arena.
I unfortunately couldn't see a photo of the setup all done.
Great, so that's what it
in the
is then.
methods. They do say in the paper that the moths were tethered in a clear cylindrical UV transmissive perspex arena with a full view of the sky and surrounding landscape.
Right, okay.
They were tethered down, so which also keeps them in the same spot, but also means they can get recordings of where they're flying. You know,
Not only do they
read that
have
info.
brain probes in these things, which I imagine are the same size as their entire brains, they're also tied down with like string.
tethered down into this domed thing, like the Simpsons dome, but for a moth.
Can you imagine being the person who had to like do the surgery and like do the like tie the tiny rope and then like put the brain probe in and then the moth wakes up just like, oh my god, what happened to
Yeah, the moths were in for a real time. These were wild.
So unlike the killer whales where the drone doesn't interfere, we're really interfering with these Bogong
We're really
moths.
interfering with the
Heavy
moths.
interference, mate. The great hindrance of much science is the ethics board, and then when it comes to insects, the ethics board cannot be bothered, so you can do whatever you want.
There's got to be someone who cares a lot about Bogong moths.
I'm sure there are. And so the results, when they were presented with the natural starry skies and no magnetic fields, when they got rid of Earth's magnetic field from within this dome, and they just showed them the real starry sky of what those moths would be expecting, depending on where they were migrating to at the point of capture, they consistently flew in the correct migratory direction for the season. So they were south in spring and north in autumn.
Wait, but without the magnetics and with the stars?
With just the stars projected above them.
Yeah.
So they are using the stars.
When they then rotated the starry skies 180 degrees.
Yeah.
So just to make sure, there wasn't a bit of residual magnetism or some other weird thing going on, the moths turned around and started going the other way.
Really? Okay.
Using the stars.
When they scrambled the stars, they went all over the place.
Can you imagine being a Bogong moth getting trapped?
Trying to work it out.
Getting something tied around your middle. You've got a brain probe, and then all of a sudden you wake up and the sky is different.
Stars have changed.
For millennia.
It's a real alien abduction.
And then they did one other thing where they introduced Earth's magnetic field back in. They put the real starry sky above them, and then they put projected clouds over the stars.
Okay, yeah.
So they couldn't really use the stars, and they continued to fly in the correct direction, which implies that they're able to use both Earth's magnetic field and the visual information of the starry sky above them to inform where they should be flying for their migration.
Did they test whether if they had the stars covered and the magnetic field flipped, whether they flew in the right direction?
The other direction?
I feel like that would be interesting.
They said I don't know. I think they only tested, maybe they tested more, but I only looked at the results where they were using Earth's true magnetic field as the magnetic guide for them. Now, for the brain stuff, they did go into the neurological basis of this behavior.
I hope so, otherwise they just probed them for no reason.
They found that brain regions responsible for navigation and steering fire
it's got to be a good 45% of their brains.
Fire most strongly when the moth is facing southwards, which shows the Bogong Moth brain encodes celestial information in a surprisingly sophisticated way. It's a remarkable example of complex navigational ability packed into a tiny little insect
Doesn't
brain.
that also imply that they're more concerned about how they're going to get south than how they're going to get back north again?
Possibly. It could also just be that bit of the brain region, they want it to have high recognition when they're going south, and then when they're flying north, it's just the opposite.
I imagine that if you're flying south, there's not that much of the Alps. So they kind of had to get really specific about where they're going in that direction. Every other direction is like, well, there's trees in other places.
Perhaps
So.
they found that these regions were firing. So there's something about the southward face, like the compass direction they're traveling in, that's encoded within their tiny little moth brain. Which
need
is
to be rude.
Pretty
Come on.
damn impressive. It's not rude. I think it's amazing. If I saw Max using a compass, I'd be like, yeah, of course Max can use a compass. If I saw a moth flying north and south using the stars, that's more impressive.
Max, can you fly north and south?
Zach from Eco Radio texted in and said, dung beetles use stars and the Milky Way to navigate. So, no.
Well, I mean, the researchers say there is no evidence before this of any invertebrate, let alone insects, using stars to navigate.
Take that, Eco
Perhaps
Radio.
They use stars for other reasons, but not for long-term, long distance navigation. They did say so. Perhaps they use it for short distance stuff. I don't know, or which times of the night to come out. Now they say this proves they're not only flying towards the brightest light or following a simple visual cue like other insects do. They're reading specific patterns in the night sky to determine their geographic direction, like migratory birds do. And they do point out that Bogong moth populations have declined massively recently. Not only do they have a big
pollution.
Ecological importance for a lot of things in the Alps in particular, like mountain pygmy possums. They're a massive food source. It just arrives for a season, and without them, the food's not there. It's the Alps. It's not a great place to find a lot of food. They also have a critical cultural importance to a number of indigenous communities around the area who would feed on them and still do to some extent, but with the numbers are so much lower than they used to be that it's a much smaller part of a lot of the culture there for the indigenous communities that are in the area. And so they say it underscores the importance of protecting migratory pathways and the dark skies that moths rely on to navigate. That's what I got for you, Max.
Sounds good.
What is the independent variable that makes no idea tick? That's what I want to know.
You got a follow-up, Gabe?
Yes, we got a text in that last story about dung beetles also using the stars to navigate, which would go against what they found in this study. What's actually happening here is it's the same research group. So Lund University, who led this research into the moths using stars to navigate, Bogong Moths, also have previously done a study on dung beetles where they found that dung beetles use the moon, polarized lunar light, to help them roll dung in a straight line. And in the absence of a moon, they use the Milky Way and
a visible moon. I'm assuming not the absence of the moon. The moon is there.
Yes, thank you. When the moon is not up in the night sky, they use the Milky Way. Yeah. And when the sky is obscured by clouds, they are disoriented, which I believe the disoriented is the word they use in the paper.
Yeah.
I believe that means they can't roll a straight line.
That's right.
God
with a cloudy sky.
God forbid they can't roll a straight line.
So they do. That would be insects using stars, but this was the Bogong Moths for the first time. Insects or any invert has been seen using stars to navigate long distance, not just orient themselves in a straight line.
No idea. Space news. If you listen to the MotoRap, we're talking to you, Peter, you will already know that Max Verstappen's Honda-powered F1 car is a rocket ship. So why stop there? Honda has built and test flown a booster, an experimental reusable rocket developed by the research and development arm of Honda Motor Company, flew to an altitude of nearly 275 metres on Tuesday last week. It landed with...
I reckon my Honda could do that. My Honda's a rocket.
It landed with pinpoint precision at the car maker's test facility in northern Japan. It should be noted that Honda already builds small private jets, so rockets are a logical progression for the company.
And amazing cars. That's a personal opinion of me.
And they run anti-clockwise, where most cars run clockwise, but that's another story. Lunar dirt, yeah, that's a fun fact for you guys. Yeah.
I assure you I can turn both clockwise and anti-clockwise in my
I'm talking
Honda.
about the engine spinning. Now, a PhD student who attends University of Technology in Sydney, QS ranking.
Oh, we just said this. UTS is...
25.
No, come on. 25?
80-something.
96.
Yeah,
For
96.
What? Sydney?
University of Technology, Sydney.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed the T.
So PhD student Michaela Smith
about the T.
asserts that moon dust may not be as harmful to humans as previously thought. Their experiments...
We previously thought it was harmful?
Yes, we did.
Know that.
Yeah.
I'm learning
Because
so
you get
much
some sort of like a hay fever after breathing it in. This is what the astronauts experience. Yeah. Anyway, their experiment...
Guys, I'm a bit allergic to the moon.
Their experiment showed, because it's so fine, the dust, that their experiment showed that the typical air pollution from a busy Sydney street is potentially more toxic than inhaling lunar dust.
Yeah, you don't say.
And
Guys, get this. The city is worse than the moon.
Okay. Now, FRB, do you know what that stands for?
Not a clue.
Fast radio burst. So on June 13 last year, a team working at the Australian Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder heard something unexpected. It was a fast radio burst, or FRB, that lasted less than...
It's going to be contact.
39 seconds. The pulse, they note, was so strong that it eclipsed all of the other signals coming from the sky. It was originally assumed that the signal had come from some distant object, because that is generally the case for FRBs, but subsequent analysis showed that it had come from a nearby source, a long-dead NASA satellite called Relay 2, launched back in 1964. No. They suggest the FRB was likely an electrostatic charge that built up on the craft and reached a certain point and then discharged. So, yeah, it's been up there for a long time.
It has?
70 years, is it?
60 years.
40, 60 years. 60 years.
It's aliens who found our satellite. I'm like, God, they just left this thing up here? What the hell? Fixed it.
Okay.
About that.
The show's no idea, but not for much longer. What do we do? Yeah, Gabe, sign us out.
We'll be back in your ears next week, wherever you're listening. Between now and then, write a secret message in ice. If you need a scratch, maybe ask an orca. And on a starry night, follow some moths and see where it leads. If you want to catch any of those stories, you can hear them back on 4ZZZ.org.au or on whatever podcasting platform you use, because we're up there too as well. Just look up No Idea for Triple Z. That's no with a K. Still got a 5-star rating, Peter?
We still have a 5-star rating. Top rated podcast on Spotify. Sorry, highest rated. Critically, highest rated, not top rated. But we are highest rated along with many other podcasts.
Equal one, as they would write it in the QS ranking.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And we'll speak to you next week.
Bye.
I'm a goddamn marvel of modern science.